Hey everyone with Parent ProTech, Joshua here, and I'm excited for our conversation today. We have a special guest, Melony Tremontozzi, and she is a woman of many talents. She is Mrs. Texas International 2023. On top of that, a wife, a mom of two boys. And what we're really going to be focusing about today is the topic of human trafficking. And her work at her own platform is Unscript, and she uses the platform also through Mrs. Texas International to talk about human trafficking and specifically the impacts on children and young people. So I really think this will be valuable to you. So Melony, thank you so much for being with us today. We're really excited for this.
Yes, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here and really appreciate this opportunity. Looking forward to sharing more about Unscript and just providing some additional education on what really is human trafficking and the realities of it.
These past few months, this topic has really seemed to kind of has risen more in predominance in conversations in our society. And I think we've seen the film Sound of Freedom, and I know many people have different opinions, and it's been in the news a lot, but I think that the one really positive takeaway is that people are more inclined to talk about this topic that's really dark, really uncomfortable. And so I want to lean into your work because how did you get started with Unscript? How did this become a passion of yours to begin with?
In regards to the movie, I highly recommend if anyone has not had the opportunity to view this movie, it is really, really an eye-opening movie. And there's, as you mentioned, it has really opened the dialogue, which I think is so good because it's an easy topic to glaze over because it is difficult. It is triggering. And I'm so grateful that the movie has stimulated this conversation. So a little bit about me and how in the world did I become involved in this space? It actually kind of goes back to a speaker I heard one day at church years ago. A speaker came in and started sharing regarding trafficking. Specifically, she was talking about children. And I just remember being like someone had kicked me in the stomach, just being so appalled at this is really happening. Like, how do I have children? How do I not know about these statistics? And I really just decided in that moment, gosh, I can speak, I can share and educate and create action on how can we fight this horrible crime. And that's really what kind of started my journey here. And so I founded Unscript. It's just in my opinion, it's an opportunity for me to educate and create awareness. And through that, I think I've had some great feedback and some great action that people have taken.
I love that. And I think so. And one organization that you're partnered with is OUR Rescue. But I want you to talk about, so the movie, and we've kind of talked about how it really sensationalizes human trafficking. I mean, it's so eye-opening and just overwhelming to watch, to see this story where they go to Colombia to rescue this child and to see that play out. But a lot of what you do and the conversation that you highlight is how this is playing out in our backyard. I mean, it's here in the States, it's here in our neighborhoods, it's here in our communities. What does that look like? Help let us into that.
Yeah, for sure. The movie certainly does provide a very, as you mentioned, sensationalized viewpoint. That is real. That does happen. Yeah. However, for most people, perhaps you think of like, oh, there's this scary white van that's driving and kidnapping a child. And unfortunately, most of the time, traffickers know or have come to know a child or a young adult, and that's how they gather their trust, and then that child becomes trafficked. I think that it's so important to really start to understand, like, wow, trafficking occurs in our own backyard here in the United States, here in our own state, here in our cities. It does not discriminate against a poor community, a wealthy community. So really that's where my heart is. It's just, how can I provide this information so people genuinely understand and can look at what are ways that I can protect my children, or I can share this information. I'm a mother, and so it's very important to me, obviously, to keep my children safe, but later on, we're going to delve into this whole social media and the internet
Yeah.
and kind of carry on that conversation.
It's a big part of it. And when we think about trafficking, I know a lot of people think it's only this labor or the sexual part, but that there's so many different pieces that are a part of trafficking. So could you help us with that too? Because I know it's also not just physical coercion, a lot of it's mental. So how do you define trafficking to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So trafficking is using like force or coercion. And so this can be labor trafficking. You'll see that where people are forced to work in horrible conditions. This could be an adult, a child, and that encompasses the labor trafficking, which is a huge problem. Particularly, we're located in Texas and we see a lot of the immigration coming through our borders. And there is a lot of labor trafficking that goes on with people who are just desperate to find a job and find a way to provide for their family. And then there is the other part of sex trafficking, and that is when a person is being utilized and forced into sexual acts. And oftentimes you'll see that this does occur with younger people. The average age, and this isn't always the case, but an average age is between 14 to 16 years of age that sex trafficking is happening. So it's terrifying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And could you have some numbers, right?
Perceptions. Let's talk about perceptions. 73% of people believe that human trafficking is widespread or occasional in the US. But when they're asked about their local communities, the perception is 20%. People believe it's only like 20% of the time. Yeah. And that's not always true. Like, reality is that trafficking can occur on your own computer, on your own devices. And so we're talking about, as we're starting to talk more and more about technology, the estimated number of active mobile devices in the world by 2024 is expected to be 17.62 billion.
That's wild.
Wow. Yeah. Let that sink in. And then 1 in 3 children would now or will now expect to have an unwelcome sexual experience online before they turn 18. Let that sink in. 1 in 3 children are expected to have an unwelcome sexual advance before they're 18. And this is online that we're talking about.
And even in the US only, I think that the FBI in the past couple of years released a report of over 500,000 active child predators online. So yeah, it's terrifying. Like you mentioned about how only 20%, like 1 in 5 people, almost 4 in 5 people think it's happening, but only 1 in 5 are willing to think of it, it's not happening in my community.
Right, that it's actually happening here.
Yeah, it is a terrifying thought. Makes my head hurt to think about, because you don't want to think, not the kids at my school, or even my wife's a teacher. Like just trying to imagine that what we see here, it's not some far off thing. It's happening here.
Yeah.
And even one small aside, we sextortion is not completely related to this, but similar in that, people being extorted online. That's what we're talking about. And in our neighboring community, there was one of our lawmakers here who his son was involved in that, and just a real tragic story. But now he's really trying to raise awareness around it. And he said that he gets calls every single day in our community, in just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, of students calling him that have been approached, have been extorted in some way online, and they don't know what to do. And many of them don't feel comfortable going to talk to their families. They don't really know who to go to. And so I think that's why it's so important that we can have conversations like this, because there are so many people and students who, they're going, if they haven't experienced this already, they likely might receive a DM or might have someone at them on Snapchat who is not a friend or family. And this is something that the more we can talk about, I think the more they're better equipped to handle those situations. So I'm with you in this 100%. I think this is so important.
Yeah, I think that this really leads into kind of an element where Parent Protect really steps in. And this is where a lot of my focus is on working with youth and really educating parents. And 54% of minors believe online grooming is a common experience for children their age. So 54%. So really what I want to talk about today too is just, if you're a parent and you're listening in on this, or you're a grandparent and you are like, oh my God, 54% of children believe this is normal to happen. They expect it. So what can we do? And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here. Is a lot of these children, youth, they're afraid to come talk. They don't know what to do. Is it normal? Oh, we expect that. So as a parent, it's really important to have that dialogue, have that open conversation. There are restrictions and things that as parents we can put into place, but I genuinely believe one of the most important things we can do is have dialogue with your child.
Yeah.
Educate yourselves together, because the reality is your child will likely be exposed to something, and it may not be horrible, but let's equip them. Let's teach our children, how can we properly handle something, how to be alert, like, oh, this feels a little off, or that was weird. Well, you know what? You're right. This is off, or this is weird, and this is how you can walk away and or protect yourself, or recognize if a friend or another student or someone in their sphere is perhaps experiencing trafficking.
Yeah. And I want to come to the action steps and the empowerment, because I mean, this is so essential. But also first, can you help us understand more of just how does this grooming take place? Because I think, we can better know what to look for when we understand how it actually plays out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So grooming, I think another perception of this is that this is that scary, skeevy looking individual who steps in and is just creepy. But traffickers are, I hate to say it this way, highly sophisticated in how they approach. And they really play into emotional weaknesses. I have a couple of steps that I want to share with you, and we'll pop a slide up on the screen here talking about 6 steps of the grooming process. But a trafficker is going to find its target, be it an individual that they find online, which happens often, perhaps in a school, perhaps at a party, an event. They're really looking for this individual, and that's their target. And what they're really looking to do is build rapport, a relationship, to gain their trust and really start to get to know this person. And then oftentimes there is some form of weakness or maybe insecurity, or, and if anyone has questions about what that looks like, I'm happy to go offline and answer further questions in regards to what does an insecurity look like and what makes somebody more at risk. But what this trafficker is typically doing is finding that risk or insecurity and meeting a need. So once they've been able to do this and they've gotten to know this individual, they can start an isolation process, which, they're really trying to get this individual that is their target to become reliant upon them. And once they've got to that point, then that's where you see like exploitation begins to occur, and the trafficker is really all about maintaining control. And so those are kind of the 6 steps that a trafficker takes, and that those initial few of gaining the trust is what the grooming is really look like, building that relationship.
And I think when a lot of people first see this, they'll think, well, I mean, of course my child wouldn't fall for this. And, of course my child's not going to get exploited, or, but the part that, I mean, the building trust, I think the one thing to highlight is that plays out over time. This isn't a, 1, 2, 3 quick process. I mean, it can be, I'm sure it can be in certain cases, but I mean, even a family friend of mine was about to meet up with a man she met over social media that she was under the impression was a 20-something and was actually a 40-something. And
exactly, that is exactly what it is, because so often, and let's just talk specifically about our kids, and they're on this, and not all elements of social media are bad. I mean, I use social media often. I love what it has the ability to do, but let's talk about this child that's on social media and receives that DM or that snap or whatever it may be. And, they think, oh, wow, this is a kid just a little older than me, or oh my gosh, this person is like a celebrity or is so cute or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And like you said, the relationship starts to develop and trust is formed, and it may not even be who they think it is.
Yeah. I know. In so many cases, it's not. And
Mhm.
like even in this particular instance, the meeting in person came after, and they didn't meet in person. Thankfully, parents intervened at that point. But it came after weeks of communication. So it's like there was so much trust built up by that point that the thought to the student was like, oh, of course this man is who he says he is, because we've been messaging for weeks. I feel like I
Right.
know better than I know some of the friends I see at school.
Yeah.
Um, whew. So,
Yeah.
and I think
Heavy stuff.
there's a lot of weaknesses too. Can we talk about that? Like that traffickers, or those who are exploiting uh, children, youth online play into, and whether that's, you mentioned insecurity. I
Mhm.
mean, I think of one example could be like an unstable home environment. I mean, are
Mhm.
there other instances like that people are recognize that you might be more vulnerable to falling prey to someone like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Homes where there's divorce or really insecure financial situations where the child
Yeah.
is often left alone, or there's abuse going on within the home, that obviously the mental health and well-being of a child is really instrumental in this, in my opinion, and as statistics have shown. I think a lot of what we're talking about today is really like what's happening online too. And then
Yeah.
for people who are meeting in person, sometimes it's a friend brings them with them to a party or
Hmm.
things like that. So there's a lot of factors. I think as parents, just it's difficult sometimes to know like what is the mental well-being status of our children, like to genuinely know. But that's why, again, I go back to this, that open dialogue, that constant communication with your child, and really just having an understanding and grasp on what is. I think Parent Protect does an amazing job of just educating and providing. It's, you keep it lighthearted, but hey, this is what's going on. This is the new
Yeah.
platform. This is what this social media little tweaks to be aware of.
We try to emphasize at the end of all of our videos, we end with questions like,
Yeah.
how do how can you begin the conversation at home? Because
Mhm.
I think you're right. I mean, when we look at apps and platforms that predators are using, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, the list goes on. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of them have parental controls. There are restrictions that can be put in place, but at the end of the day, the restriction can only do so much. Your students are really smart, and
Yeah.
I remember being in middle school, and I knew how to use I think I had an iPod Touch at the time, but I knew every way to use that thing, and your students will likely find some workarounds to whatever restrictions or anything that you set up. But like you're saying, if you can build that trust and have that foundation, at the end of the day, that's going to support them when they reach a situation that doesn't feel quite right, or feel overwhelmed. If they know they can come back to you, that's the most important part. As we think about this trafficking, I think with it being so widespread, it can be, what can we look for? I mean, are there certain signs that if I'm a teacher, if I'm a parent, a student of a friend,
Mhm.
are there any stereotypical cues that someone might be experiencing something like this?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked this question. I think I'm seeing more and more professionals become trained on this. Our educators are having to now do training on signs to look for. Our
Hmm.
steward, like airline stewards are, it's,
Wow.
they're so vital to seeing trafficked
Yeah.
individuals. Our hairstylists even. But some of the things that, for example, if a teacher is in a school, some things that they'll look for is if they've noticed a child who has become extremely withdrawn, or perhaps there's a student who has suddenly started wearing very expensive clothing or coming in with, jewelry. And this
Yeah.
would be kind of a question mark because perhaps gifts are being purchased for them that
Hmm.
gain the trust. This is an amazing life. So those are things to look for. Other things for sadly, a lot of our trafficked victims are being trafficked within their own home. And some things that educators will be taught to look for is there any unusual bruising or marks that are visible on a student?
Yeah.
So these are just a few of the things. I think any change in emotional status, of course, is something to really kind of be on alert for.
One thing we say is, if you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
mean, it sounds a bit cliche, but I think it's so important. If you're a student, if you're a teacher, I mean, even just speaking up and having one conversation, approaching that person, approaching a trusted individual at your school, a guidance counselor, that can really make the difference,
Yeah.
in watching out for someone else. So as we think about what can we do, I think there's so many different levels, different people involved in this, from parents, from students, educators at school. So maybe let's start with a student. So if I'm a student, I'm on social media, what do I need to be aware of? Or if I think I'm being targeted by, someone who I'm not quite sure is who they say they are, what should I do?
Yeah, such a great question. So as a student, let's just say you're on social media and you're getting random DMs from someone who, okay, maybe they seem so friendly. Oh yeah, they said, oh, I know so-and-so who's a friend of yours, but let's take a look. And I want to throw a slide up really quick here, of what potentially you can help your child understand, or what as a student you can look for is, these accounts. Let's say someone's reaching out to you and you look and they are following all these people, but they have 0 followers, or they're on private, or they have no posts.
Yeah.
So,
That's a
they're
red
creating.
flag. That's a red flag.
Yes, 100%. This is a very concerning account. Or, like these messages are just, there's no reason. Like, why would they be reaching out to you? Oh, maybe they think you're pretty, or, oh,
Yeah.
hey, like, cool, we got something in common. But who the heck are they? Like,
Yeah.
genuinely,
Yeah.
let that be a,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about this moment.
Yeah. Take some time to look at the account, look at, like saying, followers, even posts. Sometimes we've seen, like, people will try to make it look like the accounts has a lot of posts, but you'll go and look at the dates and it's like everything was posted in the past week. They just, loaded a bunch of pictures onto here to make it like a legitimate account.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, those are things to really look out for. And then of course, anyone who's giving you like unsolicited, overbearing compliments, or like, oh my God, I'm just using this as an example. Like, you're so beautiful, you should be a model, like you should do this. Like that should be a question mark of you. Like,
Red flag.
wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Thanks for the compliment, but what?
Yeah. That's really good. One thing I want to talk about too is, if a student has been reached out, the importance of going to family, going to law enforcement. But also, one thing I want to highlight is, we always recommend taking screenshots first, or if definitely report someone on the platform. But if you have been approached in a way that feels very uncomfortable, take screenshots, get that evidence first that you can then take to law enforcement. Because if you block someone or delete the message, then the paper trail, so to speak, is gone, or a lot harder to find.
Yeah, and this is a hard one, right, for students, because if they've received an image that's inappropriate or something that's hard, you don't really want to be like, yeah, keep that on your phone. But it's true. A lot of these can disappear. These messaging options allow, the evidence to literally disappear. So that's a great point, particularly if it's an extreme situation where there's photographs or content that's very sexual in language. Yes, if you want to be able to report it, screenshot it, and then take it to a trusted person, or we can provide resources, of course, towards the end of this.
And then what about parents? I know we've kind of been talking about it the whole time, but we talk about the trust and that being the essential foundation. But even you as a mom of 2 boys, I mean, how are you creating a space in your home to set your sons up for success? And what would you encourage others to do?
Yeah, it is hard raising children in this day and age. It is just not for the faint of heart. And I am by no means perfect. I'm sure my kids would have plenty of terrible things to say about, oh my God, my mom's so strict or this or that. And honestly, I think it's not about just putting your child under your thumb or like putting every single restriction you can think of on them, because as you mentioned, kids are going to do what they're going to do. And I
Yeah.
think the most important things as parents that we can do is become educated, understand, be aware when my child goes to school or when my child is in a social crowd, this is what they're seeing or hearing. And that knowledge will equip you to have conversation with your child. And, I have frequent conversations with my kids. Do they always appear receptive? No, not at all.
Yeah.
But that is what I'm able to do. And I think at the end of the day, they've been able to come back to me. And I hope that I have equipped them with information that teaches them, because I know that they will eventually experience something, even if it's minor or
Mhm.
it's major. My hope is that it's equipped them to be able to walk away or be able to say, like, oh, red flag here. This doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So as a parent, it's scary because your initial reaction is like, oh my God, let me just protect them and put them in a bubble.
Yeah.
Or perhaps you're like, this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But
Just
no,
avoid
I'm
it.
not kidding. Like, I think there's extremes on both ends, but just truly just educate yourself and having that conversation.
Yeah, that's so good. Now, what about someone watching this and they say they're interested, they want to know more? Are there
Mhm.
resources? Are there next steps?
Absolutely. I think Parent Protect has some great, valuable resources. I would first and foremost say, parents, hop on, parents and guardians, grandparents, whoever
Yeah.
it may be, future parents, hop on the Parent Protect site, certainly scroll through. I know I am always available to provide additional insights as well. I've partnered with some amazing organizations. We have OUR Rescue,
Yeah.
A21, Polaris Project,
Wow.
even some of the government sites provide a lot of great statistics, but these uh, other organizations, I'd be happy to provide information on. If I want to learn a little bit more and I want to dive a little deeper into this, then there's some really, really great training programs that I would highly recommend.
Yeah.
I know I've gone through them all and I've always walked away with like, wow, I didn't expect that, but that's valuable to know and understand.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, Melony, this has been so helpful. So really, we just want to thank you for your time and also encourage anyone who's watching, if they want to learn more, if they want to maybe contact you about speaking or, specifically reach out and talk to you more, they can go to theunscript.com and
Yes.
we'll link that below, but theunscript.com to see what you're doing. But thank you for just raising awareness and opening the door for these conversations. I know they can be uncomfortable and awkward sometimes for us, but it's going on. It's so essential. And I really think that you're making a difference in this. So we're with you 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Joshua. I really appreciate being part of this. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all you're doing as well.